Hey, and welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I'm your host, JR. I've got a lot to talk about going on in the Big Ten. It's Big Ten After Dark. I got my man, Larry K from Night Watch. Larry, come to you tonight. You're a Rutgers fan. I'm an Ohio State fan. And I think it's painful, but it's almost therapy for the two of us, correct?
I would say yes, therapeutic in the most odd, like it hurts so good type of night possible. I'd say the season's mercifully over for both of us.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll get into our pain and our sorrow, which I'm sure everybody wants to hear about. That's probably the main reason they came here, but we'll get into all of it. It'll be interesting. But I'm your host JR. Larry is from Night Watch, the Rutgers podcast over there. Larry, why don't you tell people about the podcast? I don't need to tell them about it for you.
Yeah, so Night Watch, if you just type in Night Watch Larry K on YouTube or Night Watch Larry K in Google, it's on every major podcast platform. We talk Rutgers sports, primarily football and basketball. We're part of the College Huddle, the Big Ten Huddle, the subsidiary of that. These guys, JR and Boggs and all these guys and Zach have put me on, and it's awesome. We are trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. We're at 910 right now. So if you guys are watching this, just please go over to Night Watch if you appreciate me and subscribe. It's much appreciated. I also write and do some other things. So always happy to be with you, JR, and happy to talk sports. And that's my story.
All right, I love it. I love it. Let's see who we got here. We got John says, I'm honestly surprised to see Ohio State sent home the way they did. Yikes. Also, USC is so bad. Yeah, I think that leads us pretty well into our conversation to start, which is that Rutgers falls in double overtime to USC 97-89. This was a game where USC pulled out in front early at halftime. What was the halftime? They were up by like 10. It was 41-30 at halftime. Looked like things were going USC's way. And as we've seen this season, Rutgers kind of gets down and then it kind of looks like, they're down and out. But in this game, Rutgers made a roaring comeback and the press really gave USC a lot of issues that they really weren't able to deal with well. Desmond Claude and Wesley Yates each turned the ball over 6 times in this game. It was giving them a whole lot of trouble. Rutgers was kind of getting back to their roots. They eventually tied the game up. The game goes to overtime, but in double overtime, USC just kind of took it from there, took the game away, and Rutgers didn't really have an answer. Larry, is that an appropriate recap of the game? What did you see out there?
Certainly is. I mean, I thought early on, especially in the first half, it looked like, look, these guys are out of gas. Um, down the stretch, I understand you pull one off against Minnesota, but overall, they look like they were out of gas a lot during the end of the season. It looked like more of the same, but then you get into the second half and they turn up a notch. And story of the season with this team a little bit when they played better defense. That was more the roots of the Steve Pikiell philosophy. They tended to get more energetic on both sides of the court. They tended to make more things happen. It's not rocket science. But then trouble closing. I thought they had a real chance to close the game out in regulation. They were up. It looked really good for Rutgers. USC comes back. And then in the second overtime, or the first overtime, Rutgers had the ball with a chance to end it again. Don't do it. And then you get into the second overtime. And I thought USC, really the difference was their perimeter 3-point shooting, which really wasn't great the whole second half or the first overtime. All of a sudden they drain a couple threes, and right there it kind of gets out of reach. Interestingly, Rutgers' story of the season has been when they struggled with rebounding, they would lose, but they actually led in total rebounding 44-39, led in offensive rebounds 21-12, lost in defensive rebounds. But I mean, overall, and USC 18 turnovers. You had mentioned the press gave them a lot of trouble. Rutgers with only 11. And I'm looking here at threes. Rutgers very low at a 20% clip on threes, and that I think bit them towards the end. I think when they were creating through the defensive side of the ball, getting turnovers, making things happen, and getting in the flow of the game, they did much better. But when they needed something, especially at the end of that last overtime there, they struggled to hit a three. I know Acuff hit one late, but it was a little bit too little too late. And they started getting into that rut where guys are just missing shots, and even had Somerville take a shot that, look, it's not like he can never shoot, but I thought it was a little bit ill-advised. Um, Harper goes off, and that's been the story of the year. No matter what happens, he goes off. Also had 8 rebounds, 8 assists. Good game from him. Ace Bailey started off strong with rebounds, but ended with only 7. And I don't say that to be pedestrian, but he had a bunch early. So to only end with that, he got in foul trouble. 17 points. Solid contributions from Acuff and Somerville. But JR, just the story of the year, just not enough from Rutgers. They had beaten USC, if I recall. I'm all over the place in the regular season, but USC gets revenge, and it's kind of the story of the lower seeds tonight.
Yeah, it really is. All of the lower seeds defeated the upper seeds in this one. Northwestern, Iowa, and USC take it over the higher seeded teams. And I'll be honest. I mean, I wasn't confident in all of my picks. I had picked Northwestern to win. I figured Ohio State would win just because I figured that was the more talented team. But
Yeah.
Iowa came out, looked like they wanted it more. And then in this one, like USC. I think they overall are the better team put together, but they still made so many mistakes in this game. They played far from a clean game. Listen, Wesley Yates and Desmond Claude, like those guys are fantastic. I think it's Rashawn Agee. He was electric. Three or no, Agbo was 3 for 5 from three in the first half. He only finishes with three pointers, but Wesley Yates there, I think they were all in the second half or overtime. His 3 pointers. Yeah, his 3 pointers. No, they were two, one in the second half, one in overtime, two in the first half. He was just lethal from deep in this game, and I mean, when the other team is able to hit threes and you're not able to, that more often than not is going to decide the game. I thought the fight from Rutgers was there in the second half. I was proud of them that they didn't, just lay down and die or anything like that, but at the end of the day, Rutgers has two very, very talented players. They have some other good contributors, but USC altogether, they probably have 4 guys who do it for him on offense, and then some other guys who can do stuff for him on defense. But it just looks like a better put together, I guess you might say, team, and a better working together, connected team.
And I think a lot of teams, Rutgers, quite frankly, is not a very good team put together. Now, you might have had some contributors tonight, but those contributors, other nights are other guys, or other nights there are no other contributors, and it's just those 2 guys. And some nights, even those 2 guys are, one of them's not playing, or they're hurt. And so USC was the better team, I thought, in the first half, and I thought when it counted in the last overtime. And I do think Rutgers, because they are a team of runs and a team of rhythm, when they got in that rhythm and they got on runs in the second half, and even in the first overtime where it looked like they might pull away again, they looked like a really formidable team. And I think for Rutgers fans out there, including me, I mean, at the end of the day, even if we were to pull this game off in a couple overtimes, you're such a team of runs that there's no consistency, and there's so many teams that are put together better, USC being one of them. If we went on the right run, we could have beat USC, and clearly there were opportunities for Rutgers to win. But once USC settled back down and Rutgers settled back down, USC was the ones who had those 3 pointers that put the game out of reach. And when you can't hit them at the same clip, you're not going to keep pace. And that was the story.
It was. It was. Now, I think the second part of the conversation here, Larry, and I have no idea where you stand on this. I didn't ask you before the show, but Bud brings it up. He says, I'll never watch a Rutgers basketball as long as Steve Pikiell is the head coach. There's a lot of Rutgers fans who are very upset with Steve Pikiell right now. We talked about him on a couple episodes ago about, just this season. And I felt like, unfortunately for him, this just wasn't really a team that he normally gels well with and does well with. It's hard to say that with 2 lottery picks on your team, but overall, like that's not typically how he puts his teams together. It does feel like the team could have been better this year. It does feel like, maybe there could have been some better additions through the transfer portal or some better players put on the team, but overall, Steve Pikiell, he's a good head coach, I think, but when you're in the Big Ten with this many good head coaches and this many guys who are together. I mean, NBA talent doesn't guarantee you anything. So, Larry, I guess my question to you is where do you stand on Steve Pikiell, and what do you think his future will be with Rutgers?
I think Steve Pikiell succeeds in a space where he's able to recruit gritty mid-tier players, occasionally an upper tier player, occasionally a gritty lower tier player who he develops. And the way some Jerry Carino does excellent reporting locally here for the Asbury Park Press in Jersey, had kind of written about this during the season, and it was kind of the idea that Steve Pikiell, what he does is he takes players and he first coaches them one on one for a season or two on his defensive philosophies and techniques. And then he takes them as a team, once developed individually, and coaches them as a team on his defensive philosophies and techniques. And that's a multi-year process. And we saw the fruits of that process in his, mid tenure. Early he was developing, and then the Geo Baker, Ron Harper Jr. days, you see that the fruits of that. They make the tournament a couple times. They won a game. They should have won another one against Houston. And in this new era, and I do think what you said makes sense. If had they kept Cliff Omori, I think at minimum, and it might have taken $1 million in NIL. I don't know. There's rumors. No one knows for sure. Had they kept a guy like that, a true rim protector, which his defense requires, had they kept more of a core. I mean, in the last year or two, a lot of guys that he brought in that would have been those developmental pieces. I don't know if he got ahead of himself, if the people in his ear got ahead of themselves, if the sport got ahead of itself. It seemed like he wasn't able to retain guys to have a core. I don't care how talented freshmen are. They could be phenomenal NBA players. The NBA is a different game anyway compared to college, especially the Big Ten, which I actually prefer the Big Ten to it.
Yeah.
And two, there are grown men in college basketball, 24, 25, and these kids are. So I think the issue, to answer your question, is going to be Steve Pikiell, with the ways he's found success. Can he still find that success in this era? And it's going to be one of two things, right? You either get a GM type person in your athletic department to figure out how to spend NIL and who to bring in and what they're worth and how to construct a team, or you bring in an assistant coach who can help you to construct offenses on the fly with, missionaries every year, or you go do what Shiano's doing with the football team and you spend most of your effort on recruiting younger guys, and then retention. You use your NIL and revenue sharing to retain guys and develop teams over years. Even if other teams are going out and reloading every year, you do it strategically, but you rebuild. If he can't do one of those things, JR, he had memories that I guess Rutgers, because they were in despair for so long, rightfully are grateful for. But you can't go this many years in a row with this failure. This season, it's unequivocal. This was a failure. I don't care what the excuses are, what the NIL was, what his coaching style was. You had two top 5 NBA lottery picks who came to Rutgers. That's never going to happen again. That hadn't happened since 1977. It's not going to happen again. And that team made the Final Four. Okay, so there's not much coming back from this. He's going to I think he's going to get a second year just because of the way the university currently is with the athletic department, the successes he's had, the buyout, but if he doesn't get it back on track this year and you don't see promise, it's time probably to move on, just because maybe he's not cut out for this era of college basketball. This was an abject failure, and there's no way around it. Now, I made peace with it a while ago, so I'm not as animated as I might have been, but it's an abject failure, man. It just is. And I don't think, my honest prediction, I don't think Steve makes it, because I don't think this era is going to allow for him to coach the way he wants, and I don't think he can master the way to coach in this era. It's harsh, it's rough. I hope I eat crow, but that's my honest opinion.
You don't think he makes it till next season, or you don't think he makes it to the end of next season?
I think he makes it through next season, but I don't
Oh,
think he
okay.
makes it long term as a Rutgers coach with another
Okay.
successful upswing season. I mean, he might make it through, but I think it's going to look like this. Last year looked like this. Now he could have a complete epiphany and say, there's a school of thought, JR, where he got ahead of himself because Ace committed a while ago, early last season, where he just said, I'm going to flip this, make this an offensive first, firepower team. I don't care about my philosophy anymore. And he just got way out of his shoes. And he thought, put all the eggs in this basket. He went out and recruited a bunch of offensive players that didn't turn out to be great offensively, because I think of his coaching philosophy. And it got away from him and it didn't work out. because of these two players that he knew he was getting. And maybe he has an epiphany and says, I got to stop that. I got to completely rebuild from scratch. Now, how long does he get to do that? I don't know. I just still think either how long are you going to give him with these failures? And also, how possible and feasible is it to even try to build a team that way? Basketball and football are different. So I don't know. I don't see him long term. You're talking 2 seasons. I don't see it. I think his seat is super hot next year. And I think if it's another abject failure where you miss even the NIT and a losing season overall, not just Big Ten, but overall, I think there's a good chance with a new AD who wants to make their mark. Maybe Steve decides to walk away, or it's a mutual thing.
Yeah, I kind of related it to Mike Woodson a little bit this season, where Mike Woodson, he's probably going to make the tournament, but fans are upset because there was a lot of NIL spent on this roster, and there were a lot of expectations. And yes, making the tournament is good, but you were talking about winning the Big Ten at the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
Now you find yourself in ninth place, and it's like, okay, well, the results are not bad, but it does not meet expectations, and I think that's a little bit of where Rutgers fans are at right now. And the difference was the situation with, I believe the president is supposed to step down in July. Is
Yes.
that correct?
Yeah.
The president's supposed to step down in July. There is no current athletic director. I don't think there is one that's currently been hired and like they're waiting on or anything like that. So, but the way these things normally go is if Steve Pikiell doesn't show a bit of resurgence, then he is probably going to be let go or encouraged to leave after the next season if it doesn't go well, because that athletic director will most likely want to bring in his own guy, somebody that he knows. And I would think Rutgers would hire an athletic director by then. Last question here, Larry, and then we'll move on. Fisherman asks, would Pikiell pull a Bennett? Tony Bennett, famously from Virginia, the game became too much for him, and he ended up resigning or retiring right before this season started, put Virginia kind of in a bad situation. I don't think he wanted to do that, felt like he needed to do that. I don't have all the story, and I don't know a Virginia podcaster who could come on and tell us the entire story, but just from the outside looking in, could you see a Bennett situation for Pikiell?
No, I can't. I like the Woodson comparison, by the way. We had discussed that in our circles too. Just not like a comparison, apples to apples, but just, yeah, how the expectations line up, the coaching style, and then you spend all the money on the NIL and you don't quite reach the heights you think you're going to. I remember the preseason hype with them too. I don't see that. I think Pikiell's just a certain kind of guy and kind of character where I don't think that happens. I do see a situation where at the end of a season, and that could be next season, where he just says, this isn't the space for me. And there could be a mutual discussion with the school. I think the kind of guy he is, where he's brought the team, that type of departure could happen. I mean, and then there's just the raw fact of the money. How would that shake out if you're going to portray it to the media as a mutual parting? Are you going to have some kind of settlement because, you're just leaving money on the table if you leave as opposed to getting fired? And so I don't think that's the situation. I think he's the kind of guy who's going to hold his head high and fight to the last minute. He kind of overinflates and he's hyperbolic sometimes about how much he believes and all that. And I don't think that's going to stop. I don't know that we all believe anymore, but I don't see that type of situation with him. I think it'll go differently.
Yeah,
Doesn't mean it might be uglier, but it's
that's what I was going to guess too.
Yeah.
Not so much uglier, but a little bit of a different situation. But that's
Yeah.
a good question, Fisherman. Appreciate you asking that. Anything else on Rutgers before we move on to our next game, Larry?
No, sir. No.
All right, let's move on to Iowa defeats Ohio State 77-70. I am a Buckeye fan. I am sad. I'm not so much sad that they lost as I am sad with how the season kind of went. And I do think there are, there's context needed to the season. I don't think it's just Jake Diebler had a bad year. That doesn't mean the year is acceptable. But I do want to talk about Iowa first, because during these Ohio State recaps when they lose, they tend to be pretty Ohio State heavy. And I want to make sure if there are any Iowa fans listening that we talk about their team first. So let's start with Iowa first, Larry, and then we'll get into Ohio State. Iowa started the game at like 5 or 6 minutes into the game. They didn't have a point. There was not much offense for them. Credit to their defense. They were holding Ohio State. Ohio State was doing some pretty crazy things and putting up some pretty crazy shots. I think they were trying to get fouls, but this was not a game that was going to get a whole lot of foul calls in it. This was a game where they were pretty much letting the guys play and do their thing. At the end of the first half, it's completely tied, 37-37. Like I said, 5 or 6 minutes into it, Iowa doesn't score. They end up scoring 37 points in like 14 minutes, which is pretty crazy. And a lot of that came from Brock Harding, who had 10 points in the first half. Josh Dix had 7 points, but really, scoring came from everywhere from Iowa. There was no one guy that was there, and kind of looked that way at the end of the game too. Iowa had four players in double figures. Only one player played. Kingsbury, he only played for a minute. He didn't score a single point, but Dembele, Traore, Thelwell, Bronze, like all these guys, they had points, and it was an impressive effort from Iowa, not just on the defensive end to begin, but the shot making, the creating their own shots, the passing the ball around as well. They had 18 assists on 29 made field goals, which is pretty good percentage. Overall, it just looked like Iowa was the better, complete, more put together team in this situation. I don't know if Iowa was the more talented team. I think Ohio State has a few more talented players, but they're a team, and Ohio State right now is not a team because Ohio State gets contributions from three or four players, and tonight only three really, and the rest of their team is kind of out there in no man's land, and you're wondering what they're doing. But starting with Iowa, what were your thoughts, Larry?
Well, I think what you say in general with basketball, I think we get carried away even from our lore of the NBA and growing up where you get these star players. It's not that they carry teams and win countless championships by themselves. They have a bunch of supporting guys who are just as good on. Whenever you look at teams that were super successful and then the same guy and he lost a couple series or he wasn't a dynasty before then, it's because there are guys around him that were able to prop them up too. And basketball is very much a team sport. This looked like the Iowa that we're used to seeing a few years ago, not the Iowa from the last couple of years who has struggled, and the Iowa from this year where even when they came to Jersey, they struggled mightily from beyond the arc and they struggled to shoot. This was the team that you leave them with open shots, they're going to nail them. You spread the ball around, they're going to make you pay. They've got guys who can hit shots and do things from all over the court. Again, the story of this game, 3-point percentage 41% for Iowa as opposed to 22% for Ohio State, 10 to 24 from beyond the arc. They made you pay. Sanford, that kid, as usual, looks like the typical Iowa player has been from jump, made things happen, double-digit scoring, one of the leading scorers on the team, as well as the other guys that you mentioned. Free throws were, only shot 10 free throws, but that's still 90%. And field goal percentage over 50%, 54 to Ohio State's 42. So this was the Iowa that I think we're used to seeing, 18 assists to 11, moving the ball, finding shots. It was interesting that they were stifled for the first 6 minutes, but then went off really for 37. How do you manage in the college game to score 37 when you hadn't scored a point for 6 minutes early? They really got the ball rolling downhill. And at that point, it was what it was. And then the end of the game, kind of fitting, hit the three to kind of seal it. And the rest is history. So, I just think, again, it's the story of teams with better talented players in certain position versus teams that make things happen and can get away with it. Now, remember, this is the first night of the tournament. So I don't know that I'm singing Iowa's praises right now, but I think in this particular game, they showed to be the more complete, more well-rounded team that can make you pay from multiple different spots, multiple different people, and they get ahead. And Ohio State really didn't have an answer at the end of the game. Now, it wasn't a blowout, but it seemed like Iowa was rolling downhill a little bit too much, and the end of the game was the story of that.
Yeah, Ohio State got the lead early, and then once Iowa kind of came back, there really wasn't, it was pretty much Ohio State playing catch up from that point. Ohio
Mhm.
State or Iowa ties it, they get the lead. Ohio State's playing catch up. They did get close there at the end, but overall, I thought it was fitting that the very first game of Ohio State's season was exactly what I said this team would be, which is they're gonna hit three pointers, and if they hit three pointers, they can beat anybody in the country, right? Look at Kentucky. Look at Purdue. Like this is
Mhm.
a team that you put them in the NCAA tournament. You put them up against you make them a 12, 11 seed. If they face a 2 or a 1, they could beat that team by getting hot from three, and that's really the only way. But they could beat that team. But they get in there, and they could also lose to a 16 seed. Obviously they're not playing a 16 seed, but if they have a night shooting like this, that's what happens because they have no consistency. They have no reliability down low on the offensive end or the defensive end. Iowa is the team that gives up the most points in the paint all all season long. In the Big Ten, this has been the worst team in the Big Ten giving up points in the paint. Even when Owen Freeman was there, they were not spectacular at it. Owen Freeman, great offensive player, does some things on defense, but he's not Clifford Moorhead down there, right?
Right.
He's not going to be throwing away shots
Right.
from the other team. But at the end of the day, Ohio State, they were getting some production in the paint. They did finish this game with 34 points in the paint, but their two-star transfers that they were supposed to be their star players coming in, not star players overall, but star transfer players coming in were Aaron Bradshaw and Sean Stewart. They combined for 2 points tonight. Aaron
That's a
Bradshaw was
problem
0
with
for 4.
transfers, JR. That's a
Yeah.
problem. You get transfers that don't contribute at the clip you want in the most pivotal games, you're going to struggle. And that's a gamble when you go out and get guys and hit or miss on a given night. I mean, that's a big problem. They're supposed to be contributors in a bigger way than that.
Yeah, I mean, this season has shown me more than anything else, the transfer portal is used to fill holes. The transfer portal is there for you to go and grab one, maybe two guys that you need for a certain area. Maybe you need some depth in an area. You grab those guys, you bring them in. Look at what Michigan State did. Look at what Purdue did last year. Look at what Wisconsin did. Like, look at what a lot of these teams have done. They have their core player of guys, and then they build off of that with the transfer portal. And unfortunately for Ohio State, Michi Johnson doesn't even play most of the season. Aaron Bradshaw is just a complete bum. I mean, I apologize. I'm not trying to go after players here, but
I know, I
if we're
get
being
it.
honest, he was 0 for 4 tonight, and all he wants to seem to do is, roam around the 3-point arc instead of actually, get in there and,
That
and
irks me
play
in
in the
any
paint.
offense. I can't
Yeah.
stand it. I
I
can't.
can't stand it, especially when you're 7-1. You're 7-1.
Yeah. Bro,
You're doing no good rebounding out there.
too much three-pointer derby in the pros that guys watch and is hanging out behind the arc. It's just, I don't know. It's boring to me, especially when you're 7-1, bro. Get your elbows dirty, get in there, get some boards. Come on.
Yeah, for sure. And then Sean Stewart, has been a good rebounder for Ohio State, but he only had 4 rebounds in this game. I mean, yeah, he only played 15 minutes, but at the same time, like, he only had one personal foul. I thought if Sean Stewart didn't get in foul trouble, we might see him for 25. We might see him for 30 minutes. But Jake Diebler went against that for whatever reason in the very first game of the Big Ten tournament that you had to win to make the NCAA tournament. Of course, they were on the broadcast. They were acting like they could still get in. I don't believe that for a second. They're not getting in the NCAA tournament. But
No.
in that game, you trust the the biggest bum on your team all season long, and Aaron Bradshaw. You trust him to play 16 minutes for you in this game, and you finally start taking him out after 15 minutes when he doesn't score a single point. I don't understand it by Jake Diebler. I don't get it at all. This team has major issues, not just with the transfer portal, but with Michi Johnson and everything that happened there. Fisherman's talked about him in the chat, and that's a crazy story. Roddy Gale leaves and heads to rival Michigan. Felix Okpara is one of the best big men in the nation this season at Tennessee. He walks out the door because you brought in Aaron Bradshaw, and he didn't want Aaron Bradshaw there, or whatever the reason was. I don't think it was quite that simple, but still.
This drama with the portal, with guys on the team and out, we've seen it on so many teams. Either guys leaving too late, the coach can't replace them, or the coach brings somebody in, they don't like the competition, or somebody wants to come in, but they're not guaranteed the starter spot. Somebody else gets offended. It's some of it's the nature of the game, but it's frustrating. And I'm telling you, if you don't have a coach or somebody in the athletic department who can manage personnel the right way, you're going to struggle. And then you got guys like Thornton out there who are constantly producing, who's an absolute beast again tonight, 24 points and just a monster, but you don't have the cast you need because the way that the portal and the way that guys left and came didn't work out well. And you're left out in the first night of the Big Ten tournament. It's frustrating.
Yeah, it's frustrating for Ohio State fans, and more than anything else, I think it was frustrating that the NIL that was paid for this team that was supposed to make this team better to Aaron Bradshaw, Sean Stewart, Michi Johnson was wasted. right? And you were relying on guys like Quez Glover, who is a nice. I mean, he does some nice things on defense, and to his credit, he's doing his best on offense. But I mean, he's not a scholarship player. He should not be playing. How many minutes he play? He should not be playing 11 minutes
11.
for
Yeah.
you, right? Colin White, who is a true freshman, and yes, he was Mr. Basketball in Ohio last year, but he's dealt with injuries all year long too. He's not ready to contribute out there on the offensive end. Took a three in this game that was just like, what are you doing? You know?
Hmm.
So overall for Ohio State, it's back to the drawing board. They do have some freshmen coming in. I do hesitate to completely judge Diebler at this point just because of all the stuff that went around with it. I judge him more by his roster construction and roster management than I do really his in-game coaching. You know, he was able to get guys like Micah Parrish and Bruce Thornton and, Devin Royal to produce. And then John Mobley has had a rough stretch of games, not shooting well, but overall, like that quick release and everything, that's valuable. You have to keep that. You have to develop that into something because that is going to turn into something for you eventually. His freshman year, quite frankly, he was just put into too big of a role. He
Right.
should not have had that big of a role. Sean Stewart should have never moved to the five, but because of all the roster issues you had, that's what happened. And for Ohio State fans, it stinks. I think they would rather the season be over, but look forward to it. I guess you got the crown and the
Yeah, the crown, bro,
Vegas and
and the
everything going
transfer
on.
portal. It's weird because that's so late. Guys are going to be like off and on, and it's like, look, I think a lot comes down to roster construction, and if you bring in transfers to try to put yourself over the edge, you spend all this money. That if you have that money, maybe it's better spent retaining guys and developing them because maybe it's harder than you think to take mercenary teams every year. And maybe some guys are good at mercenary teams, and some guys are better at developing the guys that are there. The time will tell with him. And yeah, the crown, I don't know, man. I mean, I remember 2 years ago when we went to the NIT because we were so mad we got left out of the Big Ten tournament. I had to sit there and watch us lose to like Hofstra or something. So I don't know. Season being over is good for me. I don't know what you were hoping for, but we'll see.
Yeah, Fisherman, you're right. He said they paid Bradshaw and
Millions.
Michi millions. Yeah, I don't have the exact number, but I know it was not six figures.
Mm-hmm. It's
Let's just
crazy.
say that. And Fisherman says, I doubt they play in tournaments. I don't know exactly what the agreement is, but I was told that Fox has an agreement with the Big Ten. You
They do.
cannot you cannot say no to the crown. If they want you,
Interesting.
you have to go. The thought process is that teams will not have their star players play, and that might, make the crown not choose them. But I mean, at the same time, like it's so late. If the crown started earlier, maybe around the same time as the NIT, I think it could possibly work. But with how late it's starting, I mean, I had somebody on Twitter tell me today they were hoping Ohio State lost so that way they could go to the NIT and win it, and they felt like that was better momentum for the program. And I just told him, I was like, dude, if Ohio State goes to the NIT, you're going to be starting Quez Glover, Evan Mahaffey, Colin White, Bruce Thornton if you're lucky,
Good luck.
and you know Sean Stewart. Like that's
It, it,
that's
it,
gonna be your team. Like maybe Micah Parrish because he's a senior. Maybe he keeps playing with the team. But at this point, like it's not gonna do a whole lot of momentum for you. It is not gonna come up on the ticker when they talk about this season.
no, not at
Crown
all.
winner. Like
Not at all. The
nobody's
crown
gonna
is.
talk about that.
It'll be something you have on in the background. I don't know why you're dealing with this spring barbecue or something. I don't know, bro.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird.
And I'm pretty sure it's like on some of the same days the NCAA tournament is being
Yeah.
played. So it's
So
like,
very odd. I mean,
yeah.
we'll see. I'm just curious who's going to go and how it's going to go and what fan bases are going to think and whoever it is. So we'll see.
Am I wrong to say I'm kind of rooting for chaos?
No, I don't think you're wrong, sir. I
Like I
think
think it'd be fun
sometimes.
if we just had a crown tournament of a bunch of walk-ons playing
No,
each
that's
other.
what I.
Like
But listen, I'm going to tell you right now. I think I'd have more fun. Like rather than scrutinizing these guys getting millions from the portal or these superstar draft picks, like give me like some walk-ons and some guys that were like unsung bench heroes and throw them in, and like everybody starts over, and the fan bases just have a good time, and anything can happen. I'd rather that than like getting mad at the same guys who've been mad at all season, or somebody sits out and the other team has a guy play whatever. Like, let's just go chaos.
yeah. No, Fisherman, that's what I'm saying. The players are not contractually obligated to play in the crown invite. but the teams who are invited are. And the Crown only has three conferences to choose from: the Big East, the Big Ten, and the Big 12. They should have called it the Big Tournament, but
Yeah,
apparently
absolutely.
they weren't thinking of that. But yeah, I mean the schools are obligated to go, but that doesn't necessarily mean the players are, which is one of the biggest issues here. They should have waited to do this until contracts happened, because if you had a
Yes.
contract, then you could say,
Yeah.
well, you have to do the contract, yeah, type of
Yes.
stuff. So
What?
we'll see. You got any faith in Iowa going all the way, pulling an NC State or anything like that, Larry?
No.
No, yeah, I don't either.
I'll keep it simple. No.
Sorry, I don't think you're gonna face front courts that's only gonna score 2 points on you for the rest
No.
of the time. So could get hot. We'll see what they do against Illinois, but I
Right.
wouldn't. Yeah, no. I that sound gross even just saying see what you can do against Illinois. But all right, Northwestern defeats Minnesota 72 to 64. This was an interesting game. Kind of happened earlier in the day, so I think some people may not have saw it the entire time, but it was a close one for a good amount of it. As I bring up my thing here, there we go. 32 to 29 at halftime. Northwestern eventually pulls away in the second half. Felt like Minnesota had a lot of fight in them, and that was good to see. Parker Fox did some really nice things on defense with some blocks and stuff like that. But overall, this is a team that rides. This Minnesota team rides with Dawson Garcia, and Dawson Garcia scored 22. He was 7 for 13 from the field, 2 for 2 from three. I mean, he did everything he could possibly do in this game, but it was too little, not enough, because again, Northwestern looked like the better put together team. Even with two of their leading scorers not playing because of injury, they still looked like the better put together, better coached team. Now, I'm not saying, I mean, I'm on record saying I don't think Ben Johnson is as bad as some people say he is, but at the same time, this was a game where Minnesota didn't look as connected as Northwestern. And Chris Collins is a really good coach in my mind. I think he's one of the most underrated coaches in the Big Ten in the country. He might be Indiana's coach next season. We'll see. But at this point, it's season over for Minnesota. Northwestern still playing. They'll face Wisconsin. I don't have a whole lot of hope for Northwestern in that one, but anything can happen. It's March. Larry, what were your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I mean Garcia doing a little bit of everything, hitting the boards too, 7 rebounds, 3 assists. Martinelli going off 28 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists. I'm curious what the weather currently is in Indianapolis, because I'm hearing something about Northwestern was angry that they had no air conditioning in the hotel and it was like 85 degrees. And I'm like, what do you, it's March. What are we talking about? But apparently there was drama with that, and they are not too happy with how they're being treated. I mean, you could find this story. It's very odd, but they come out and load up and play ball, and close game for a lot of it. And I think Minnesota, I think a lot of people thought kind of snuck in the tournament there towards the end. So I think a lot of people might have thought, not like Northwestern's world beaters, but it was close. Northwestern still pulls it off at the end. Um, again, another story of a lower seeded team playing more like a team, getting things done. Um, you had a battle with, really Garcia is going to put 22 away and Martinelli's going to put 28, but who else do you have there? And Minnesota had Mitchell with 11, but other than that, not a ton of support. Whereas, Berry for Northwestern, 14, Clayton 11, Wyndham 10. So there was a little bit more of a team effort and a little bit more of a supporting cast score there. And that was the story of the game, I think.
Yeah. I felt like Minnesota pretty much the entire game was just off balance. It just felt like every time they were trying to find themselves, it felt like Northwestern had a different answer for them, and they could never, completely get on the same page together as a team. Their pace was up and down, all together. With the way they operated, it didn't seem like they were very connected. I mean, just overall, it felt like they changed their defense a few times. It looked like they were trying to go to a few different offensive selections as well, and it never looked like anything was cohesive. Now, is that more on Ben Johnson, maybe not having his team prepared? I, I would doubt Ben Johnson didn't have his team prepared, but maybe. Or is that more on Chris Collins and his guys just doing a really good job of confusing Minnesota? At the end of the day, if you're Ben Johnson, even if it is more Chris Collins, you can't let that happen. So I do think that's a coaching failure on Ben Johnson's part. But I mean, from everything we hear, Ben Johnson's going to get another year next year.
Mm,
And people, some Minnesota fans aren't too happy about that, but it is what it is. The revenue sharing coming in, it sounds like this next year is probably Ben Johnson's last year. He's going to get a chance at, and if it doesn't go well, they could be moving on from him and say we'll give another guy an opportunity to have revenue sharing. My biggest issue with it is Ben Johnson's never been really given the financial backing in this league. I said on the show like they gave Ben Johnson $5 when everybody else had $20, and they said go put a roster together.
yeah,
And I mean that's why you see guys like Elijah Hawkins leave, and other guys from last season who ended the year really well leave and go elsewhere. It's because they couldn't pay him. They paid Dawson Garcia, they paid Mike Mitchell, but they couldn't pay everybody else, and so they had to go into the portal and get some guys who didn't have big names. They played fine this season. It wasn't like they were awful or anything. They weren't 7-22.
right.
But they still weren't good enough for Minnesota fan standards.
No, they weren't, and I guess with revenue sharing coming in, it's a new frontier where my thing with revenue sharing is I'm hoping that when you have a baseline of some significant money, guys will play for you because there's a significant amount of money in general. I know people are saying, well, everybody's gonna have the same basis of revenue sharing, and then teams are still gonna spend above and beyond. Very true. But at least if you have a basis that you can play with, it gives you some ability to say you're still getting a significant amount of money here, even though they can pay you leaps and bounds above. And I wonder if the market eventually comes to some sort of equilibrium when you're paying guys millions who aren't necessarily producing at the level you want. So at the end of the day, I'm curious about it too. If he gets one more year, I'd like to see him with revenue sharing. And I just think the story of the game, you look at the stats, even in the team stats, and they're pretty darn close. And it was just a matter of Northwestern executing better. And if you're saying, it came down to coaching, it's very possible too. And Northwestern moves on.
Yeah, and Phillips point out the other ones for L. Payne, Cam Christie. Yeah, you could have held on to Cam Christie. The reason you didn't hold on to him was because he knew he could go to the NBA and make some money. If you had I don't want to say competent NIL. That sounds disrespectful. But if you had a better NIL that supported that program better, and listen, Minnesota actually does have a pretty good NIL. The issue here is that Minnesota supports everybody NIL wise. They don't just support a few different programs and then say the rest of them, oh, okay. Some places will support, primarily men's in football. Some programs will support primarily football and women's. You kind of pick and choose. Minnesota, it sounds like from what I've heard, they're kind of in a situation right now where they're trying to kind of support everybody, and it doesn't work out for them because everybody else is picking and choosing, and you're deciding, well, we're gonna, have everybody have some, and that kind of leaves you behind in every area, unfortunately.
I wonder if they're
Um,
going to do that with revenue sharing, because I know there's a breakdown with revenue sharing, like with Rutgers and whatnot, where most of it's going to football and then basketball and then the rest. And I wonder if they have a chance to restructure where the money's going at Minnesota once the revenue sharing comes in, maybe take a breath and say maybe we should allocate more of this to these, or if they continue to try to make it equitable amongst programs, admirable, but yeah, you're going to stumble a little bit in this new era of college basketball.
yeah, I talked to a guy. I wouldn't call him an insider or anything like that, but just a guy who knows the program well. And I asked him, I said, "Do you think they're gonna keep doing that?" And he said, "What I was told was it'll be different." I said, "Well, what's that mean?" He said,
Yeah,
"I don't
so
know."
so there
he
you
said,
go. It very well may happen. There you
he
go.
said it's just gonna be different, and I was like,
Mhm.
"Okay, all right, whatever, whatever that
Maybe with
means, I'll
the
take what
money,
I can
they
get."
could still keep those other programs afloat, but allocate much more to football and basketball, which would make
Well,
sense.
and Minnesota is a program that cares a lot about their hockey.
True.
And they
Also
want to see their hockey do well. They
true.
just lost in baseball like 29-1 to Kansas or something like that, and that kind of shows the situation they're in there when you don't really allocate resources to baseball, but you do allocate resources to hockey, but also hockey. I mean, Minnesota fans don't need to bring up hockey right now. They're in a little bit of a you know frustration there because of the NIL. Anyway, don't even bring it up. But yeah, so I guess the last thing to talk about here, Larry, is that air conditioning thing you brought up. The Athletic put out a tweet and it said Northwestern men's basketball coach Chris Collins called out the Big Ten for placing his program in a hotel without air conditioning.
Okay, so what is
Yeah, it says players slept in rooms with temperatures soaring past 85 degrees. The quote they got from Chris Collins was, we're used to being treated like that by this league. They're trying to get us." Um, that's interesting that Chris Collins feels not just upset with the hotel, but apparently this sounds like this is something that's happened before. He's not happy about it, and I'll be honest, I'm pretty grouchy too if my AC goes out. Now my furnace went out earlier this winter. That wasn't quite so pleasant, but that was more worrisome than grouchy. But if
Yeah.
I'm sleeping in a hotel soaring past 85 degrees, I didn't get much sleep last night, and I'm probably a little grouchy too, Chris Collins.
Well, that's why I'm wondering if they took it out on Minnesota because like that bro, I've slept with it's and imagine a hotel where like the sheets are a little scratchy and stuff. Like, are
Oh
you
yeah.
kidding me? But my question is this. I'm telling you, why was it 85 degrees in the hotel in March? I'm
That's
not
true.
this is not they're not in Louisiana, right? I mean, right? Am I wrong? Is this
Yeah,
what is
it
going
had
on?
to be sabotage. Yeah,
Is there a heat wave? Did they turn the
Phillips on
press
it here.
on?
Phillips
What is
on it here. He says Ben Johnson or Greg Gard, they're sabotaging Northwestern. They not only was the air conditioning not working, but the heat was turned on.
Yeah, what is going on? And like they're out to get us. I think he was mad about a snub maybe with the all Big Ten team. I think somebody else referenced. So, it's just funny to hear like a team like Northwestern who's been there for a while. Like that's always like you hear from Penn State, you hear from Rutgers, like, oh, this league hates us. But Northwestern is kind of okay. Like, didn't know about that. I'll take note. I mean, okay, sir. Kind of crazy. Kind of crazy statements. Like I just thought it was an interesting story, and then at least they won. So whatever.
Yeah, so every time I watch a game, if there's a press conference that I can pay attention to later, I will plug in the transcript of the press conference and get some notes out of it so I can know if there's anything I need to go back and reference. I typically watch almost all press conferences, but
Mhm.
or post game conferences, but sometimes when I have a show after it right away like this, it can be a little hard to figure
Oh
out
yeah.
which ones I should watch and not watch. And this one of the notes was just hotel frustration. When I first saw that, I thought, what?
I love
I
that.
gotta go back and watch that one. And yeah, I mean, he just expressed frustration with the Big Ten over the ongoing hotel issue and felt disadvantaged as a coach and as a team as they were not able to prepare and adapt to their new surrounding. We got West Coast teams traveling time zones. Northwestern doesn't have air conditioning.
What's going
What
on?
happened to the conference we once left, Larry?
Yes, what is happening? It's 70 degrees in Indiana. Like what's going on, bro? Chaos. That's all I gotta say.
John says the heat being turned on when it's 70 downtown is diabolical.
Yeah, it is. Especially
Yeah,
downtown. It gets even
yeah.
hotter.
It has to be an inside job. Larry, we've joked, me and Kent, Casual Big Ten, about having a conspiracy theories podcast once a week or maybe once a month on this channel, and I think that one would make it.
I think it
Who?
would have to. Would have
Yeah. Who's more likely, Ben Johnson or Greg Gard? So,
to.
we will let the rest of you opine that one and let us know in the comments what you figure out because we'll do our investigation. For
Yeah.
now, we will look at the Big Ten tournament and where things stand now. Probably won't spend a whole lot of time on this, but tomorrow your slate looks like Indiana and Oregon, followed by Northwestern and Wisconsin. They'll take a break, and then they'll have Iowa and Illinois. And then to finish off the nightcap, they will have USC and Purdue. Please, USC and Purdue, don't go into overtime. I don't want to be up at midnight again. I anticipate it won't be. I think Purdue will handle that one, but that's just me.
Yeah, I honestly think a lot of these teams from tonight, to be honest with you, I mean, the action really starts tomorrow and then going forward. There's a lot of good teams that have shown us a lot. And I'm actually really curious to see who winds up at the top. But I don't necessarily think there'll be a ton of surprises tomorrow.
I think Indiana and Oregon will
I was
probably be the best game.
just gonna say that. Well, that's
Yeah.
like looks the most interesting to me, honestly. Like most
Yeah.
intriguing.
They just played a couple weeks ago, kind of ended in a little bit of an interesting fashion that I think Indiana could have came back, but they didn't. Oregon won that one, and then Northwestern. I mean, maybe the AC gets going, maybe they feel a little bit more rejuvenated.
Reinvigorated.
Yeah. Maybe they turn off Wisconsin's AC.
Now that might help.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I would think aren't all the teams in the same hotel? They
that's what
really
I
put every
thought.
single team in a different hotel.
That's
18
the
team
other
or
thing I
15.
don't get. That
15, sorry.
has got to be at least another one other team in there. Like, are they also having trouble with the AC? Like, what is going on here?
Maybe it's like Michigan State and they just didn't get there yet or something. I
Like,
don't know.
that's what I don't understand.
I don't know. Yeah.
Especially
Well,
the Big
and
Ten, we're not used to this hot weather, bro. This is not the SEC. We're not built for this, bro. What are you doing? Like,
maybe it wasn't even supposed to be for Northwestern. Maybe like as Northwestern leaves, Wisconsin comes in and takes their rooms. And, the person who was being diabolical meant to have the rooms be hot for Wisconsin, instead
yeah.
of, and Northwestern, like they were like, you weren't supposed to win. Like
What are you doing here? You're supposed to be
you were
out.
supposed to lose. The heat was
Yes.
supposed to get you. Now
I'm one of the people I like to sleep in the cold. Okay. So,
Oh, yeah.
like, I feel bad for any team, like, but maybe they get it cranking, they sleep in the cold, they get a great night's sleep, they come out with more energy. We're going to see.
Yeah.
And we're going to continue to follow this air conditioning story.
Yeah, we will. And we'll reference it on the conspiracy podcast if we need to.
Yes.
All right, last question, Larry, and then we'll get out of here. I didn't tell you I'd ask this, but I figure I'll get your gut reaction. Upset tomorrow. Which team do you think is most likely to get an upset seed wise? I don't know what the lines are and everything right now. So your lower seeded teams are obviously Indiana, Northwestern, Iowa, USC.
You know what? Just because I'm feeling crazy with this AC thing, just give me Northwestern because they're just on a tear. They're angry. Now I don't know. I don't have any analytical backing for that whatsoever. I'm just
Scott's gonna show up at the game with his hair standing straight up. He's gonna get a technical.
so amped up about those comments at the presser after a win. I just can't. I gotta go with that.
All right. Sounds good. I love it. All right. John said, we're used to it raining or still snowing in Indianapolis around this time of year.
That's what I understand.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, it's been nice in New Jersey, like above average nice, but that's like 60 degrees. So
yeah.
And today was like 49 and it was nice. So what the heck's going on in Indiana? Like I was like, oh, okay. Like it was nice, but 49 nice, not 70 or 80 nice. What do we do?
As I say, I wore shorts this morning and it was 41 degrees when I stepped outside. And it was like, oh, not how nice. Like I woke up in the morning and there's not frost on the ground. Wow.
Well, I wore my jacket outside and then it was 45 and I was like, I'm taking this off. And I didn't have it on all day. But that's our level. That's why I'm saying what is happening.
Exactly.
We're not used to this no air. What are we doing? Why is it hot? I'm very confused.
We'll report back to you tomorrow night with well, not we, Larry. This was his one time joining us, but Larry, we really appreciate you joining us. Thank you for your expertise on Rutgers and air conditioning and everything else you brought to the show. Tell the people where they can find that wonderful expertise in the future.
And I really appreciate coming on. Always an absolute pleasure. So I had a blast. Thanks for having me. Find me at Night Watch. It's right here. Night Watch Larry K. On your guys' way out, can you just type in Night Watch on YouTube? Go over there and click subscribe. Get me to 1,000 subscribers. But every major podcast platform and Night Watch on YouTube. I'm talking Rutgers and once in a while some air conditioning woes, and you could find me over there.
As one does, air conditioning woes. So, all right, everybody, we appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for watching. Join us again tomorrow night as I will have, who is it tomorrow night? Ryan from the Sports Chat 513. I believe he's going to be with me tomorrow night. So that should be a fun time. Going to try to get some more West Coast people on since we're doing this kind of stuff late at night. So Larry, you were the East Coast one. I'll have West Coast people on the next 2 times. We'll see how it goes. So cool. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. See you next time.